Only the last tank saw them, and he began to shoot. And the commander shouted him, "Why are you shooting? We are in our territory." He said, "This is Syrians, already here. We didn't believe that they arrived so west." Their problem was that the T-55 have only 5 degrees of degradation.
That means the cannon can't be aimed very far down. It's a disadvantage for a tank on higher ground, engaging an enemy approaching from below. Beyond that, the Israeli shot cows have a high degree of elevation, making it easier to hit targets above them.
They had to expose themselves if they wanted to have enough degradation to shoot at us. So when they expose themselves, we shoot them. So by that way we succeed to stop them.
The real problem there was simply Syrian junior officers allow small Israeli forces to completely derail the one thing that might have actually secured victory for Syria, the drive to take the Jordan River bridges.
Israeli reserves from the 39th Battalion stopped the Syrian 1st Armored Division at Pt Road. But farther south, the Syrian offensive remains unopposed, as 40 tanks of the 132nd Mechanized Brigade advanced towards the small village of El Al.
I received orders to ascend to El Al and seal up what is known as the El Al position. It's a position between 2 deep canyons, about 2 kilometers wide. He who possesses it and successfully holds the position controls all routes down to the Sea of Galilee. At around 9 o'clock, through my binoculars, I start to identify what we in the armored call masses of dust. This means that you can see the clouds of dust far before you hear the noise. And through the binoculars, I notice some movement from a distance of about 4 kilometers.
That movement in the distance is an entire brigade of Syrian tanks. Their mission is to occupy the western edge of the Golan Heights, overlooking the Sea of Galilee. From here, the flatlands of Israel lie almost undefended and at the mercy of the advancing Syrians.
If they are successful and pass us, the Syrians will be at the Sea of Galilee, and I understand that a loss or even a retreat is not mine alone. It would be fatal.
October 7th, 1973. It is 20 hours into the Syrian attack on the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. And in the rugged and rocky northern sector, 2 Israeli tank units struggle to hold off the Syrians. But in the flatter terrain of the southern Golan, masses of Syrian armor have rolled over the Israelis and are pushing on towards bridges over the Jordan River.
At around 9 o'clock, through my binoculars, I start to identify what we in the armored call masses of dust. This movement ahead becomes clearer and clearer, and then we start to identify Syrian tanks. They are getting closer and are stopping at distances of about 1,500 meters, and we start to notice a lot of strikes. At the plateau of El Al, it's absolutely flat. It's as if they put the tanks on a billiard table and said, "Please, go ahead and play now." You can see huge distances. There is nowhere to hide. And the only thing that can save you is your own capability, your own skill, and to always be on the move. I always make sure that the tanks are always moving and not firing more than what's called a ball to the target, which is just 2 or 3 shells, one after the other. We fire one and then adjust. We fire another and then move to another position. In order to get a target, you'd have to stop and stand. Then you bring the turret to a point where it is in line with the enemy tank. You give the range according to your estimation. When everyone announces on, I give the command to fire.
The Israelis, for their part, maneuvered constantly. They darted from firing position to firing position. Most Syrian armored units didn't maneuver at all. They simply drove straight at the Israelis.
And so this is really the big difference between the Syrian and Israeli armies. Syrians, when they gain territory, they hang on to it to the death, which might be good, but is very bad if you need to maneuver.
The simple fact is that the Syrian tankers are just no match for the Israeli counterparts. The Israelis have taken the best shots that Syria has to give, and they're now in a position with enough combat strength that they can begin to push back.
So we started to move unit by unit, and I found myself alone in Ramtania. There was 2 hills, and I was in the cradle, you know, of the hills, overlooking Hoshnia village. I saw a regiment getting fueled or rearmed and so on. And I started to shoot at them. And I saw some Syrian tanks leaving the hills. And I started to hit one by one because they were standing one next to the other, very, very close.
The Syrian tanks are sitting ducks for the Israelis' high-explosive squash head, or Hesh round. On impact, they squash against the target and explode. Creating a shock wave that tears apart the inside of the tank.
I think I destroyed something like 7 tanks before they started to move and to understand that somebody is shooting at them. They shot back. Our tank started to bend. As we evacuated from the tank, after a few meters we left the tank, our tank exploded.
The outnumbered Israelis fall back and regroup, and the Syrians gear up for a final big offensive. By late evening on the 8th of October, they've assembled an entire armored division, over 250 tanks in Hoshnia, a tiny hamlet in the South Golã, which is about to become ground zero in one of history's greatest tank battles.